The How to Train Your Dragon series is one of the greatest animated trilogies of all time, spawning a legacy of TV shows, specials, and many unique dragon species and designs. But did you know that this franchise was originally based on a book series? The films are very different from the books, however. The main story was almost entirely different. In the books, Vikings were already training dragons from the start. Toothless wasn't a sleek, menacing, cat-like Night Fury, but was rather more similar to a terrible terror. And possibly the biggest difference is that in the original books, Hiccup could talk to the dragons in their native language, Dragonese. The films were originally going to be a lot more similar to the books, with early concepting and animation tests already being made, until the original filmmakers left the project, and Dean DeBlois and Chris Sanders were brought on board to create the movie that we now know and love. Now, one of those many changes made to the films were the dragon species. So, in this video, I'll be going over the dragons that were adapted from the books into the film series, and any of the fascinating changes that were made during their adaptation. And, if you haven't read the books, fear not, as this video will contain no spoilers for the story of either series. So, let's begin. The original book series doesn't have a class system in the same way that the movies do. There is no Strike class, Stoker class, Boulder class, or anything like that, but rather they were more so categorized by their habitats. You have tree dragons, sky dragons, nano dragons for the super small ones, and more of that general variety. So firstly, let's address the elephant in the room, Toothless. As you no doubt know, in the film series, Toothless is a Night Fury, the single most powerful and feared dragon species in the known world, and possibly the last of his kind. In the books, however, he's the smallest, most unthreatening hunting dragon anyone on Berk has ever seen. Rather than a sleek black, he's a bright green. And whereas the film Toothless gets his name from his retractable teeth, book Toothless just straight up has no teeth at all, but rather, he uses his sharp little gums to bite through things. So really, the book and movie Toothless couldn't be much more different from each other, though Toothless in the first film does carry over a bit of the original's attitude.
Nothing to be afraid of.
In early versions of the film that were supposed to be more faithful to the books, Toothless was supposed to be much more similar to his original appearance. But when the new filmmakers were brought on board, that original model of Toothless was repurposed into the Terrible Terror, and they even included this cute little scene in the film that almost serves as a meeting between both iterations of Toothless. Nextly, let's turn the page to have a look at the Monstrous Nightmare, and how it differs from its original book counterpart. One of the biggest differences here, aside from the colours of course, is that while the film series Monstrous Nightmare has a wyvern body type, meaning they have two hind legs and walk with their wings, the original book design has the typical four-legged dragon body. In fact, very few of the book species can actually be considered wyverns. The book Monstrous Nightmare doesn't actually have the ability to set itself on fire, but it does have extendable talons unlike the film version. And much like a lot of the book dragons, it was actually a lot smaller in the books, as it was actually a hunting dragon rather than a riding dragon, meaning it wasn't even big enough to be flown. Another interesting tidbit is that in the books, only the chief or a son of the chief is allowed to train a Monstrous Nightmare. Despite this, Snotlout, who is Hiccup's cousin in the books, still gets a Monstrous Nightmare, who isn't named Hookfang, but rather Fireworm. Instead, Stoic had a Monstrous Nightmare named Hookfang. All in all, these are pretty much entirely different dragons altogether, and yet they're probably one of the closest to of all the dragons on this list, because some have absolutely nothing in common, as is the case with another of the main film dragons, the Deadly Nadder. Where the movie Nadders are very bird-like in their appearance and movements, the original Deadly Nadder was actually very snake-like, often liking to sleep twisted around each other, resulting in them getting all tangled up. The name actually makes a lot more sense for the original book dragon, being a play on the word adder, which is a type of snake. There is also a second species of nadder in the books, that being the 8-legged nadder, which is almost identical to the Deadly Nadder, aside from of course having 8 legs. Both of these species are classed as cave dragons, and they certainly don't have any abilities relating to flinging sharp spines. Despite the film Nadder being one of the main dragons, very little is actually known about its book counterpart, with the only real similarity between the species being their names. The Gronckle, however, has always been a bit more of a rotund, bulky dragon, even having a clubbed tail in the books. The book Gronckle doesn't eat rocks to generate lava, however, instead just having a typical fire blast, and eating fish like most other dragon species. Except for Fishlegs' Gronckle, Horror Cow, who is a vegetarian. But now it's time to flip the script to a dragon that was very prominent in the books, but very obscure in the film series, the Windwalker. Again, this dragon was one of the main species in the books, being Hiccup's faithful riding dragon. But when this dragon was adapted into the film series through its introduction in School of Dragons, it was really adapted in name only. Firstly, this thing is a tidal class dragon, where in the books it was a sky dragon. It was also originally black and covered in fur, with the babies being a little fluffy ball of fur and feathers, with the fur receding as they age up. And as expected by them being sky dragons, they're extremely fast flyers, one of the fastest dragons in the world, as opposed to the franchise Windwalker, which is of course covered in scales and more adapted for a semi-aquatic lifestyle. In the game Rise of Berk, there is a Windwalker individual however named Hiccup's Windwalker, which looks extremely similar to Hiccup's Windwalker in the books. Being found with shackles around his leg, the description reads, in another universe, he and Toothless might have flown together as Hiccup's companions. Aw, that's a really sweet homage to the book series. But now, onto a dragon that's prominent in both series, the Red Death. Or the Green Death? No, not that Green Death, this one. Wait, that's not the Green Death either. You know what I mean. The queen dragon in the film, known as the Red Death, was based on a dragon from the books called the Green Death. But then, when the game Rise of Berk added an individual of the Red Death species, it was also named the Green Death, which is considered a whole different subspecies from the Red Death, and the Green Death from the books is from a species called a Sea Dragonus Giganticus Maximus. Yeah, it's pretty confusing. Only made even more so when the film Red Death was originally going to be called the Green Death. But, scaling things down a bit, we have one of the coolest species from the books, the Silver Phantom. Known as the fastest and highest flying dragon in the world, the Silver Phantom is extremely rare and extremely powerful, with its stunning bright blue flames making for a spectacular final sight. School of Dragons was once again the game to adapt this dragon into the film series, with its design more closely resembling a Timberjack or Typhoomerang. This one is a lot more faithful to its original book iteration than the Windwalker was, even retaining its deadly blue flames. It's able to fly at extreme altitudes, and this solitary dragon likes to keep its distance from other dragons and Vikings, spending most of its time flying above the clouds, making this dragon an extraordinarily rare sight. And more still like its book counterpart, it's known for its ability to fly at extraordinary speeds. Now, the next two dragons will be the final two film species based on ones from the books, but just because we've covered almost every direct adaptation from the books, doesn't mean there aren't other dragons from the books that strike some surprising similarities to ones from the franchise. As is the case with the monster of the Amber Slavelands, an underground sea dragon that lives beneath the sand, able to cast glass to secure its underground cave. Sound familiar? It's very similar to the Sandbuster from Race to the Edge. Only the Sandbuster doesn't have eyes on its hands. Yeah, this is a very bizarre species. The Mood Dragon from the books also shares similarities with the Hobblegrunt, both changing colours based on their mood. And while Astrid isn't a character from the books, a blonde-haired girl named Kamikaze owns a Mood Dragon named Stormfly. But yet another book species introduced to the franchise via School of Dragons is the Devilish Dervish, being an elusive, fast and muscular sky dragon in the books, turned reckless, scythe-tail sharp-class dragon, said to be extremely unruly and hard to train, using its bladed scythe tail to cut down trees. And the final species from the books being the Prickleboggle. The first of the book dragons to be adapted into School of Dragons, this relatively large mystery class dragon has an icy breath and healing properties. Being very compassionate creatures, they're normally quite calm and sensitive. In the original book series, however, this is a Prickleboggle. Yeah, so I was very surprised to learn that the book Prickleboggle was actually a spider-like nano-dragon, with their only real trait being extreme stupidity. This one can't remember, does he eat the ant, or does the ant eat him? This has got to be the book species with the most different franchise adaptation. Part of the reason for this radical difference between the two may be that the Prickleboggle in School of Dragons was originally going to be called the Nettlewing, meaning it was likely a last-minute decision to give it a dragon name from the book series. But, unless I'm mistaken, that has been every How to Train Your Dragon film species that was adapted from the original books. This has been a very fascinating journey, and I'm actually surprised just how few of the book dragons were adapted into the film series. And it has been very interesting to see the many differences between both iterations, with some being completely unrecognisable. So, I hope you've enjoyed this little journey into the book series that started it all, and that you've learned a thing or two about any of these amazing creatures from both of these amazing series. Thank you, yes you, for watching the video, and I shall see you in the next of my videos that you so choose to watch. Good day, hooligans, and happy dragon training!